Welcome to another edition of the World Cup Mood Board with me, Jarrod Kimber, for 99.94. Okay, let's get this all started here with, I don't know, let's say one of the biggest sporting rivalries in the world. Hey, Rock, why don't you take it away, Maestro?
Live, the world will stand still. This is more than just a cricket match. It's time for
Ireland
versus
Scotland.
My personal favorite part of that is that we rushed that so much after I mentioned I was going to make the joke yesterday that you could still see the you still see the Pakistan and India stuff in the background. Anyway, we're here now. That was a massive win by Ireland. It was from nowhere, wasn't it? They were completely out of that game. According to WinViz, I think the highest percentage that Scotland got to was 90% chance of winning that game. In fact, if you danced around the win predictors, as I want to do from time to time, I think Cricinfo had them at 93%, and some of the others even had them at a little bit higher. And after 11 overs, it wasn't like the win predictors were drunk. They were accurately suggesting what looked like was going to happen in this game. And then, needing 2 runs a ball with the top 4 all gone, it just didn't look that likely for Ireland. From that moment onwards, of course, Ireland didn't lose another wicket, and it all went very poorly for Scotland. And of course, that all comes back to Curtis Campher. Here's my favorite story on Curtis Campher. I forget who the other player was. I'm going to say Niall O'Brien. It might not be Niall O'Brien. He'll probably send me a message to tell me it wasn't him. But there was a tour match in South Africa, and the Ireland team were playing there. While they were playing there, Curtis Campher was playing for one of the South African sides, and he started sledging the Irish players and also mentioned that he had an Irish passport. He's, as far as I'm aware, one of the few players in history to sledge his way onto a team. So that tells you a little bit about Curtis Campher and his confidence, if nothing else. My second favorite story is, although is this a story or is this now a recurring theme? My favorite recurring theme of Curtis Campher at the moment has to be that at every World Cup he turns up at, he wins one game almost entirely on his own. He's like Kevin O'Brien, but with better hair. This was better than his 4 wickets and 4 balls against Netherlands at the last World Cup. There was an element of fluke to that. I know that annoyed Irish fans at the time, but you go back and you watch it. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. There wasn't really an element of fluke in what he did today. He took 2 for 9 and only bowled 2 overs, so he was under bowled as well. And considering how Scotland went at the back end, perhaps he could have bowled a little bit more. And then he went out and smashed 72 from 32 when basically Ireland was on Aer Lingus on the way out. I mean, they weren't on Aer Lingus because if they were to leave the tournament, they would fly in Emirates. But they were metaphorically on Aer Lingus on the way out of this World Cup at that stage when Campher went ballistic. And there was a combination of clever hitting, but there was also a lot of wild slogging in there and just the normal sort of incredible energy that he has. I really enjoyed the last 2 balls. I think it was of Mark Watt's final over where he reverse swept Mark Watt and it timed it. It wasn't far away from being caught, but it was a very good option, that shot. And then the next ball, he sort of lapped him. He slapped the right way. He scooped him, really, like you would a seam bowler. It just showed that he was playing the dimensions of the field. There was a few big hoiks out on the offside and the leg side at times, but there was also a lot of really good thinking there. And that was really, that was an important over because it was Mark Watt was probably, Scotland's last chance at that point to be able to really come back. And it's important to know that Campher isn't some incredible top level talent. There's nothing I've seen in his game over the last 18 months or so. I suppose he's been on the scene that I've seen quite a lot of him play. He's not a top tier player, but he does have a collection of really handy smaller skills. But I think almost the most important thing with him is the fact that he doesn't give up. He's very full-hearted, full-chested, however you want to do it. He just is a cricketer who really throws himself at the game. And there's absolutely no doubt he's got that kind of James Hopes vibes. I'm sorry if you're not old enough to get the James Hopes reference, but I remember Peter Roebuck once writing about James Hopes and basically saying if you looked at Hopes and he was playing in club cricket, you go, yeah, he's a good cricketer, but that's pretty much his level. If you look at him in representative cricket, he's a good cricketer, but that's pretty much his level. Just Shield cricket, that's pretty much his level. International cricket, and you suddenly go, well, wait a minute, how did he get here? You look at Camphor, and he's not that dissimilar to that kind of player. If he was playing club cricket, I don't think you'd sit there and watch him and go, that's an international player. And yet, here he is, and 2 World Cups in a row, just completely owning the joint. It's a phenomenal effort to do that. Even more so that he sledged his way into it, which I really like. He wasn't alone, of course. George Dockrell. He's one of the more interesting stories in recent world cricket. He was a spinner who was so good when he was young that England were going to poach him. He was tall and accurate and left-armed, which is a pretty good combination. But by his, mid to late 20s, he was almost done as a frontline spinner. He was almost done as a spinner altogether. He's had to rebuild his bowling of recent times. And so he decided that he still wanted to stay a professional cricketer. And so in order to do that, he had to take his near non-existent batting and reshape that into something else. And he became a T20 hitter. You could see that in one of the boundaries he hit today. He was just miles from the ball, but the power that he had, even though he didn't time it and wasn't near it, he still managed to hit it past long on and long off, straight down the ground from a bad position. That's not a batter. That's really one of those power players. And, he's been working really hard in the nets. Here he is working really hard in the nets right here on his game. Not live, of course, because it would be very dark in Hobart if he was to do this now. But he really has turned himself into someone who can really muscle the ball away. I think that is, I think it's remarkable. And he was sort of the backup today, but we have seen a lot of games for Ireland over the last maybe year when he's come back in as a batter, where he's been the person to up the strike rate the way that Camphor did today. So I thought it was incredible. Camphor is someone who came to Irish cricket, and they obviously had to upskill him a little bit to get him to international cricket. Dockrell is like Irish all the way through, right? He's on his second Irish career at this point. And that is a huge victory for Irish cricket professionalism. And that's really what got them over the line today. And if you think about Scotland's not quite at that level of professionalism. And that's sometimes the difference between these teams, right? Of course, I've said a lot of nice things about Ireland, and it's worth now mentioning that their top order, if they're going to keep winning consistently, they're going to need a lot more runs from their top order. Andy Balboni told me on a podcast, maybe earlier this year, that T20 cricket isn't Ireland's best format, and it would be. I agree with him there. In fact, I may have given him a leading question on that one, if I remember correctly. But their top order just don't score enough, and I think that's the heart of their problem. You can see here that they're down towards the bottom of the teams who have qualified for this World Cup in terms of how many runs they get out of their top 4. They're a long way away. If you look at Pakistan, New Zealand, India, South Africa, England, really all those teams, Australia's the only other team there, and they don't always play their full strength team. But all those other teams are in the top favorites of this tournament. If you want to win consistently in T20 cricket, obviously strike rate's important. Obviously bowling is important. But the bedrock of that is consistent scores. And if you're not getting your runs out of your top 4, which these teams are not, which Ireland are not, the other teams, a few of them are doing okay, it's a huge problem for you. And Ireland got away with it today. Let's be honest. You're not going to get, Curtis Camphor's had his one superhero game, right? You're not going to get many positions where you're 4 down, you need more than 2 runs a ball, and you put on a 100-run partnership. Ireland should be going home from this tournament. And it took 2 players to basically steal that back for them. That is something that should be, that should continue to worry the Irish camp going ahead, that they just can't consistently put pressure on teams by making runs from their top order. Scotland, wow. Mark, what went for runs today? Some of that was, of course, risky hitting from Camphor and Dockrell. I think it was Camphor, actually. I'm trying to remember that particular over, but they did go for him. But again, what showed how intelligent he's been with his cricket. He bowled a 77-kilometer ball not long after he bowled 102, 103-kilometer ball. And the 77-kilometer ball got his wicket. He's just, thinking light years ahead of some of the other players. And it's actually quite hard to change your speed by that percentage. When fast bowlers do it, it's because they're putting revs on the ball. It's a bit different for what Mark Watt is doing. He's purposely slowing himself down and fastening up and still yet controlling the ball and putting it in the right positions. But the rest of their bowlers, even Watt went for runs, but the rest of the bowlers I thought were even more disappointing. Once Camphor and Doc went for it, they didn't hit their Yorkers. Their slow balls weren't very effective. I couldn't work out if they weren't bowling to their fields or if the fields weren't set correctly. I'm being not it's one of those things when you're not at the ground, it's a little bit hard to tell, but it just felt so many times that they were bowling to places that didn't make sense when you saw the boundary that was hit. But they didn't clamp down at any stage there. And in the end, Ireland won really easily. One thing I would say is that I thought that was going to be a better pitch for slow balls. Scotland don't particularly have a good slow ball lineup. I'd say almost their best slow ball bowler is their captain, Richie Berrington. He doesn't really bowl that much anymore. I think he might have bowled an over or two in the warm-ups, and he didn't get used. I don't think you suddenly put Richie Berrington into what was going on there and he would have had success. But perhaps on pitches where slow balls are more important, that isn't the strength of the Scottish team. They don't have anyone who's probably, that kind of a high-level change-up bowler. But I really think today was probably just more about execution. I don't think they particularly got anything right. Scotland lost from a near unlosable position, put themselves in jeopardy of not going through to the second round for the second straight tournament. And because they lost, we don't get to talk as much about Jones as we probably should. He's very young. I think this was his 15th international game. I'm looking at my notes. It says 15th, but I feel like that's a typo. But he's very early on. I don't think he's played more than 20 games anyway. And he smashed 86 runs from 52 balls against good opposition, good bowling attack. The rest of his top order didn't fire the same way that he did. So that was huge. And in all honesty, if Scotland had won, like they should have for three-quarters of that game, then we would be talking much more about him. So it's exciting anyway for Scotland, with Kyle Coetzer going, with some of the other players getting closer to aging out in some cases. They really needed someone like Jones to come through. I thought it was a great, really well-controlled, smart innings from him. It just Camphor, needed to score quicker and did score quicker, if that makes sense. On to the next game. The West Indies have won a game in this tournament, meaning finally the two highest ranked teams off the mark in this part of the tournament. It was messy again from the West Indies. I thought Johnson Charles struck the ball okay, but I never thought he was going to take the game away from Zimbabwe at any point. Other than him, I got some runs from Rovman Powell and some runs from Akil Hussain. If you're having to deal with Akil Hussain scoring runs for you, even though his batting has improved massively and he's, getting to the point where if he's not an all-rounder, he's at least a reliable hitter down the order. That's not ideal. And it's not that either of those completely smashed it around. I think that the win is obviously quite good for West Indies cricket, but I don't think anyone is looking at that and going, this is a magnificent performance. They won the game without batting particularly well, maybe is the best way of putting that. The biggest problem, of course, was when they lost the 4 wickets in 2 overs here. You could see that caused them. I think that's the difference between the West Indies putting on a total that would have made them completely safe against Zimbabwe and giving Zimbabwe a decent chance of winning. No, not that Zimbabwe was. It was always going to be tough for them, but if they put on 170, 180, I think that really would have pushed Zimbabwe a little bit further. Whereas that total, I think at the halfway point, Zimbabwe would have thought they were in with a chance. Remember on the West Indies top 4, remember that it was only last game that Simmons said their batting was unprofessional. We didn't say that of the top 4. He said that of the entire side, from what I can remember. Which is probably largely true as well. So if you just steal my graph from Ireland and bring it over to West Indies, although have I got that color right? That looks purple. Have I given West Indies a purple color? I'd like to apologize for all people from the West Indies there. There's no doubt that there's still problems within their batting group. I don't think fabulous Phil Simmons is looking at this one and going, we nailed our batting. Certainly not. And if you look at their top four, their top four struggled a little bit more than Ireland. The one difference I would say there is I think Ireland have changed have probably been a more settled lineup, whereas West Indies have tried kind of everyone in the Caribbean. So there should be more natural variance there. But at the same point, they've tried everyone because they really haven't found top order players to be consistent. Even the players that should have been consistent in those roles haven't. Evan Lewis hasn't always been available. Something needs to click very quickly for the West Indies. And I didn't see it clicking in this particular game today. Though I will say that their bowlers did look good in this game. Oben McCoy, there was one ball that he just got incredible drop on his slow ball. And when he's doing that, makes him very hard to play, especially at his pace with his arm. Akil Hussain, again, just a massive fan of him. I thought he bowled really well. Holder got some wickets there as well, didn't he? But it was Alzari Joseph. Zimbabwe were looking like winning this game until Alzari Joseph came on. Now, winning the game, they were a long way off that, but they were ahead. They were feeling it. Raza hadn't come in, and Alzari Joseph bowled fast. I think he's been the most consistently fast bowler so far in this tournament. It's obviously early days and not everyone's played yet, but he is definitely bowling quick so far. And I thought he looked the difference. I'm not sure if Zimbabwe would have made it anyway, but I certainly thought he was very good. Let's just go on to Sikandar Raza again. Just wanted to mention, obviously, Zimbabwe lost here, and I think I said this on the end of the show yesterday, that they are feeling a little bit like him or bust, especially with their batting. Their bowling's obviously a little bit more. In fact, I thought their bowling was, again, really good today. And Raza looked like, even though they'd lost a couple of wickets when he came in, he looked like he was in good form. He hit that big shot early on, and then, sort of clothed one up in the air not long after that, which was a little bit disappointed. And that was kind of it. I know they weren't that far away, where they were 25, 30 runs away at the end, a couple of big hits. But that was a point where the game looked beyond them. They just didn't have the quality outside of Raza. But let's just talk about his bowling for a minute here. In fact, you could almost say, West Indian inspired bowling. He's the first major bowler I've seen that copy the Narayan style of running in with the ball behind your ass. And I'm pretty sure he did copy it directly from Narayan, because Bharat mentioned that that he talked to Raza, and he'd said that before. I say ball up your ass. You can say behind your back, whatever you prefer with this Sun on Narayan style. You can see it on a couple of clips of it up there. But I did wonder when Narayan did it, how long it would take for other bowlers to start to do it. We've started to see a couple more spinners trying knuckleballs now as well. And so there is no doubt that, we're seeing a change in what finger spinners can do in limited overs cricket. On Raza directly, I think it just shows that he's peaking at the moment in kind of every part of his game. He's got the experience, he's well traveled, he's obviously got high level skills, and he's thinking about cricket just really, really well. All those things are coming together. He ended up with 3 for 19 today. I think he took 1 for 20 in the last game. That's not bad for a bloke who historically is more of a part-timer. I think in T20 internationals, he averages about 12 balls a game. And so far, he's bowling far better than that. And I think a part of it is this new bowling action of hiding it so the batter doesn't get any clues. As you come in, you can change your grip, you can change the deliveries. And at the very least, batters like to look at the ball a long way out, and he's stopping that from happening. Of course, he'll have to continue to find magic up his ass in order for Zimbabwe to get through to the next round. He does feel like a big chunk of their team right at the moment with bat and ball. All right, we have 1 day left of the World Cup requalifier, or 1 round left, I suppose. Not 1 day left, but 2 days, 1 round left. And we've seen 7 of the 8 teams at the moment can still make it through, which is very, very exciting for us. Group B has 4 teams on 1 win, which is a lovely symmetry. And if you want really good symmetry, you could just see in the Group B section here, where Zimbabwe are, they have no net run rate. Carbon neutral. 296 runs in, 296 runs out. That's just beautiful. I love that. Anyway, it's not important at all, is it? But sometimes it's the little things. Group A should be fairly simple. UAE won't make it. Namibia should make it. So that leaves us with a knockout game between Sri Lanka and the Netherlands. They have met 5 times in major internationals. I haven't gone back to all the old ICC knockout trophies. They probably had to play against each other in the 70s to see how their record was. But in major professional cricket, in of the last 10 years or so, they've played 5 times in white ball cricket, and in almost all of those, in all of those situations, Netherlands have been left naked, chained to a radiator in a dodgy hotel in a bad part of town. It's not been good. I think the closest game I found between the two teams was a 55-run loss in one-day internationals for the Netherlands. And in the 2 T20 internationals they played against each other, they've lost by 8. And Sri Lanka have chased the totals down by 8 and 9 wickets with like a lot of balls remaining in both of those games. So far, you would have to say that this is, if Netherlands are 2 wins without a loss, but they are in a very precarious place because of who they're playing in this next round. That said, also don't think Netherlands has completely clicked as a team yet, certainly with their batting. So it'll be very interesting to see how this game goes ahead with that one. But that is pretty much it to see who goes in with Namibia. Group B's 2 straight shootouts. That was easier to say when I wrote it down, which most things are easy to say when you write them down. If you've got, basically, if you're a team and you win, you end up with 4 points and you're going through. So, I mean, that makes it easy. I haven't looked at the weather. I'll look at the weather tomorrow because it's a couple of days out yet. But Zimbabwe beat Scotland 2-1 in a T20 series the last time they played, which was in Scotland in 2021. So you can use that in your WhatsApp chats if you want. And the West Indies have lost 3 of their last 5 white ball matches against Ireland. 2 of those losses were in the ODI series in the West Indies. They also have lost to them in a World Cup in the Oceanic, but it was in Nelson in New Zealand, not in Australia. But still, I think Ireland would go into that fairly confident. And I think Zimbabwe will go into that fairly confident, even if I think those are probably going to be the underdogs with the bookies going into those games. And then we've got some injury reports. Golf strikes again. Josh English. It's the second time today I've said Josh English when I mean Josh Inglis. That must be me rather than his name. The Australian middle order player cut his hand playing golf when his golf club exploded. I'm saying exploded. It probably didn't explode, right? It probably just broke. But either way, it doesn't seem like a very normal golf injury. I'm not sure there are very normal golf injuries. But anyway, remember that it wasn't that long ago that Johnny Bairstow was ruled out of this World Cup also because of a golfing injury. When players get injured playing football in the warm-ups, we talk about whether teams should ban that. I'm just putting that out there. 2 wicket keepers in the one World Cup because of this cursed Scottish game. But obviously, we're hoping it's still quite early doors on this. We're hoping that Inglis isn't that badly hurt and can still play in the tournament. Although, more importantly, obviously, golf should be cancelled. But sadly, Reece Topley is going home. We talked about that on one of the earlier episodes. For those who don't know, Reece Topley's, it's almost a miracle at this point that Reece Topley is still playing professional sport. He's quite clearly talented enough. I don't even think we'll ever see the ultimate version of him just because his body hasn't allowed him to do that. I don't know Reece particularly well. Occasionally we swap messages on social media, but I know his father quite well. I've worked with his father before, called IPL games together, me and Don Topley. But regardless of that, just you've got a cricketer who cannot keep himself fit. And it's a real shame. And I think anytime we see a professional athlete like that who keeps coming back, because it's easier once you've had as many bad injuries as Topley has to give it away, and he refuses to, and he keeps coming back. This is bad for England. I mentioned this on the other show. He was one of the few bowlers I think they were pretty sure of coming into this World Cup. So again, they don't have Jofra Archer, and they don't have him, and they don't have Johnny Bairstow. They're starting to rack up the injuries again, and I really think it was the injuries that cost them as much in last time as well. So I think that's a real shame for them, and certainly for Reece. And hopefully he can recover and play in another World Cup very soon. But yeah, that's the end of the show today. So I'll just pop over to your comments and see what we've got over here. Uh, as Jad said, how did you see Zimbabwe's approach of going for it against high pace and tall bowlers, and losing wickets? Could they have been a bit more conservative? I mean, they got in front of the game through that method. I just think Alzari Joseph bowled quite well. I think if you're talking about that sort of that Secunda Raza period, I forget who it was who was caught at point. Was it Jongmi? No, I can't remember who it was who was caught at point. I didn't think they were completely terrible shots. I thought they were good shots. If they got a couple more boundaries away then, it would have been close to a run a ball. So I can see why Zimbabwe went with that. It's easy to say it didn't work, but I don't think it's a very strong batting lineup. There's certainly, from everything I've seen of them over the last, 2 years maybe now, really the bowling is starting to fall together quite nicely. The batting I don't think is quite on that level. Um, Just having a look here. Mhm. The outcast says, "What do you think of Namibia playing Zane Green as a specialist wicketkeeper who doesn't bat?" Yeah, it's a good question. He has batted up the order before. I think he has opened 7 or 8 times, and he hasn't played that many games. So it's not that he's a specialist keeper. It's that he's not a particularly attacking T20 player, and I think they've given him lots of chances. I don't know how old he is, but I get the feeling that they think of him as a project player. So I think sometimes when we see a wicketkeeper down the order now, our first thought is, "Oh, great, a team's picked a specialist keeper." Usually, it means that the player is still learning the game, and there's just other players who could score quicker or better up the order than them at the moment. But he's a fantastic athlete. He really does fly around out there, and I really like. There's no doubt that he is there's a lot of his game to like. Until he can make runs consistently, I think they're probably going to have to bat him down the order a little bit more. Let's have a look. Also, with no username says, "How much are you looking forward to having all these teams in the group stage in 2024 rather than this silly semi-qualifier stage?" Yeah, it's the associate cricket has got so much stronger, and we've actually, while they're getting better, we've pushed them further away. I mean, to think we had teams like Canada playing in the 1979 World Cup, right? That was barely a cricket team. Just a couple of good players, and now when we have so many good associate players around the world, where we're in a situation when we don't do that. Are the teams as strong? No, because if they were as strong, they would be consistently up there and they would be winning all the time, and they wouldn't be an associate anymore. But they should be given a chance. And I think it helps for narrative. I think it also just helps. I don't know what modern cricket fans feel, because international cricket isn't the same as what it was when I was growing up. But when I was growing up, being able to watch these other teams that you didn't see much of was exciting and exhilarating. And I've still got a Kenya shirt, right? Those sorts of things are, I think, just as important as it being really high quality. A World Cup, this whole idea that World Cup should only be, the top level teams, that's not really what a World Cup is. A World Cup should be a celebration of the world of cricket. And I don't think having this re-qualifying event at the start is really a celebration. It's a cop-out. They know it's a cop-out. Everyone knows it's a cop-out. It's so stupid. You've got people on the commentary saying things like, "Oh, when the World Cup actually starts." Like, the whole thing is so monumentally stupid. Frederick says, "I noticed a lot of associate teams were better bowling than batting. Is that because of lack of domestic setup?" Associate teams were better bowling than batting. Well, Scotland and Ireland are probably two teams. Obviously, Ireland aren't associate anymore, but when they were associate, were certainly two teams that did have better batting. I think if you look at the history of cricket, usually the newer teams usually have more strong batters and they struggle for bowlers, but that is more test based. And I wonder if in T20 cricket, it's easier to get more spoiling bowlers in. And and cheat your bowlers a little bit more. Whereas at a certain point, when you get to that upper level, you need players who can flat bat a ball back over 90 mile bowler over their head. And I wonder if that is a particularly hard thing in this format. But if you look, generally new Test teams have struggled to take wickets. So it's not been that way throughout the history of the game, Frederick. But I don't know. It's a good question. It could just be a random pattern, I think, as much as anything. Is there a scenario where Sri Lanka can top Group A? Oh God, I've lost the points table from in front of me. I don't think so. But I'd have to have a look at that for him. I mean, yes, there is. I don't think that's the most likely scenario of thinking about it without the numbers in front of me. Horse with no usernames just said Green is 26. T20 isn't suited to his batting. Yeah, look, you've got to remember with Namibian cricketers, we don't know what 26 means. We don't know how much high-level cricket he's played. We know that there's only 4 or so major teams that play within Namibia. He might not have developed at the same rate. It doesn't mean that he can't do it, because he is a natural athlete and he does see the ball quite well when he's wicket keeping. But yeah, as we currently see it, there's absolutely no doubt that he's got to work on that. Lucky Music says, oh wait, that wasn't the question I wanted. Kanishk says, why do you have such less subscribers? I don't know. Subscribe. Tell all your friends to subscribe. We'll be here every day of the World Cup. So, press the bell. Is there still a bell on YouTube? Maybe that's why I have such less subscribers. I don't know if there's a bell there. But yeah, we'll be here every day. We're going to do it around 2 p.m. British Standard Time. Sorry if I don't know what. There's so many time zones. I'm not going to try and single out all the rest. But try and work back from that. It won't be British Standard Time. Did I say British Summertime? Yeah, it won't be British Summertime soon, so that will change slightly as well. But yeah, we're trying to do the games. We're trying to do the show as close to the games as possible, live, cover as much as we can. We'll be using some clips from 99.94 here and there, and clips of The Rock. Apparently, he's going to be on every particular show. Trying to look at this tournament as much as possible. Obviously, it's myself. Charlie Reynolds is my co-writer. He didn't write this episode, though, because he was flying out to Australia for the World Cup. And we've got Muku on the machine behind, pressing all the little buttons and everything else. But huge thanks to everyone for coming on to these things. The more of you that come on and ask questions and share and like and subscribe, the more we can do with this show going forward. But thanks to everyone who has. And unsurprisingly, I will see you again right here, pretty much the same time tomorrow.